I hope everyone can hear me. Um, so it's 5. Last class, guys. I guess we can just start with homework review. Uh, I just want to start with the homework from last week, which was um, kind of listing kind of the top 3 kind of issues you see in gardens, either ones you tend or just generally. A lot of you guys had some similar, I mean, the same issues. I would really love for you guys to share what you guys, some of the issues and like your solutions, because different people kind of approach them differently, especially in terms of how to like budget it into their work. And but yeah, several of you guys kind of listed the exact same problems. So I think this would have been, I feel like this class specifically would have been really helpful to do in person, or to have like to basically be able to share, since so many of you guys have kind of overlapping kind of work. So it's really nice for you guys to do that. So as best we can, um, I know some of the issues that came up were things like plant failure, just plants dying, and client communication and like managing expectations. So and that came out quite a bit, like managing client expectations, even in terms of like what the garden looks like right after it's been installed, to um, just any kind of expectations on how to manage a garden. Does anyone want to share anything regarding, like, for example, I know plant spacing was another one, like kind of the plants at maturity, client communication, like pruning type things, which usually was related to the kind of overplanted. Does anyone want to share kind of some of their solutions for those things?
Yeah, uh, I can start on that.
Cool, please do. Thanks, Saul.
Um, yeah, so for spacing, I remember going off of the website, like recommendations of how much they grow, and usually I found that it grows at least a foot more, or sometimes a little bit less, but usually more. And so I I started to design for a foot more spacing, not going off of what the website does says, um,
Right.
but pretty much it just I just put it up to maintenance costs or pruning costs. I just budgeted under pruning, and just cut it back so that it's not so crowded.
Right. So you like add that in, you kind of what's the word? Um I just had a brain fart. I was going to say, I'm sorry, but yeah. So basically, you budget it in and send the invoice or something like that when with the hours for it took for pruning.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, yeah. Several people talked about that, like either um, things getting really big, or like you said, sometimes much smaller. So especially, I think we have quite a few people that do plant designs in this class. So like just not knowing, uh, what's too big and what's too small type of thing.
Right, right.
But yeah, I find if it's, I think that for me, it's more of an issue when they're bigger than you had planned for, because like you said, you have to do a pruning and whatnot. So I think planning for them to be larger is easier, because then you don't have overplanted issues. Whereas if you underplant something, you could always kind of pop little guys in to fill in the space if need be.
Right. Yep.
Right. What about, I know Melissa and Haley, you guys both mentioned plant spacing issues. Do you have any kind of anything to add on what Saul was talking about too? I don't know if you guys are even in the class yet. um, I guess.
Sure.
Okay.
I can say something. Yeah, I run into people, and I think I mentioned this a couple times, who want like the Piet Udaf like look, and they want this like instant garden, but they pay for like 1 gallon plants or what have you. And so they end up wanting to space things really closely too. And I think maybe developing some sort of clause or kind of conversation around like, well, you're going to have plant loss and possibly damage you know, we put things too closely together and it might look beautiful for like 1 year, but then, you know,
Yeah.
2 3 years, it's not going to look so great. So yeah,
Yeah,
that's
I
what I have.
liked your kind of consideration of like maybe including it as a clause, in whatever bid that you create, kind of just to like, any touch you can have where educating clients about like overplanting or any issue really, I think is super helpful, because you never know when they're actually going to pay attention. So if it's in the clause, if it's something you say in person, at any time you can get that in there, I think is really helpful.
Totally. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, so plant spacing, that one came up, I think, quite a bit. I would say it's like in the top 3 of homework things, not plant spacing or overgrown or anything kind of related to like, the full mature size. But yeah, I think if anyone else wants to add too, there was also obviously it's like kind of anything around irrigation, like irrigation mismanagement or lack of an irrigation system, or maybe the owner not understanding their irrigation system very well and maybe not appropriately, anything related to irrigation. That was one that came up quite a bit, overwatering. Does anyone want to kind of share kind of their solutions for that? I know,
Oh,
yeah, go for it. Oh, I was just
I'll
going to
share
mention
mine,
yours,
Claire.
Kara. Yeah, please do.
Oh, yeah, my solution was billing the irrigation audit kind of separately so that you go in and have the time to spend, a couple of hours really going through each zone. And then included in that would be kind of creating a nice schedule that would be easy for the client to understand and kind of get them involved in the process as well. Because a lot of
Yeah.
times with irrigation systems, you either have a homeowner who doesn't want to have anything to do with it, or you have one that likes to go in and tinker with it.
Right.
So I think that kind of figuring out what you're dealing with and how you guys can, come to an agreement on how things should be working.
Right. Yeah, no, I'm glad you shared, because I think that was a good potential solution, like having an audit or like an irrigation audit and then billing for that specifically. And yeah, like you said, I think it really depends on the client. Yeah, some people love getting in there and some people don't even want anything to do with their irrigation. So just, yeah, assessing what kind of client you have. But I love that possibility, that's just another service you bill for, which is like, hey, do you want an irrigation audit? Because I'm seeing a lot of issues with it or whatever, I think that's a great solution. What about, does anyone else have any kind of irrigation overwatering kind of solutions that they come up with? It doesn't have to be an audit, but maybe anything related to that, because that is a big issue with many gardens. Jay, didn't you also have something, a lack of an irrigation system?
Oh, yes. Sorry, I missed the first few minutes, so I wasn't sure what you guys were talking about, but yes.
I'm just reviewing homework and yeah, just kind of like going over, several people had the same kind of issues, and I just wanted everyone to kind of share, because you guys had such kind of like insightful homework responses, and it's kind of unfair that I'm the only one that gets to read them. And so I was kind of hoping you guys could share.
Okay, yeah. For my client, there are 6 zones that need to be re-landscaped or landscaped at all. And there is only one spigot in the very back of the property, and it's very, very old and corroded. So there's no irrigation system exists in existence right now, because they're remodeling a historic home and property. So my challenge was that the problem that I foresee is, the plumbing. They're going to have to do additional plumbing, install additional plumbing, additional spigots, let alone purchase irrigation systems like controller boxes. And so that could potentially, it's like sticker shock. It's like, but they didn't even realize. They're like, oh,
Yeah, I mean, I imagine, yeah, especially on an old home, like some of that stuff
Yeah.
just doesn't exist. So yeah, but that's like, potentially just an entire its own project. So like when Kara was saying like an audit for the irrigation system, yours is just like, its own standalone kind of bid and project, like installing an irrigation system. And I assume you're doing the design. So like,
Yeah.
yeah, you
I'm
would
doing
do,
the design and the implementation. So, but as I shared, like the design is also has to coincide with the construction schedule. So it's really, which this construction schedule is kind of waning. It's like
right.
not, yeah, it's kind of back and forth, back and forth. So there's a lot of moving parts.
Right. Yeah, and it sounds like you kind of had mentioned in your email, I believe, like essentially, clarifying with the client, like what any kind of construction timelines and whatnot, and making sure that you're clear about like revisions and things like that. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Just
because someone else also had kind of like a issue with revisions, and potentially like a client liking a design and then like, months down along the process are like, actually, and they have all these revisions. So kind of including some amount of revisions in their design. And did you
yeah.
have any?
Yeah, just I was thinking just being really clear on setting boundaries and policies with like how many revisions the proposal my fees will include, and then after a certain amount of or a certain number of revisions, like I'm thinking three meetings or 3 rounds.
Mhm.
In total, and then after that each round is going to cost them an additional whatever.
Right.
So as far as the irrigation, I'm really concerned that like I just want to make sure that I get the right kind of system, and that I suggest the correct number of systems, plumbing wise.
Right. Like hydro zones for the,
Yeah,
yeah.
hydro zones, so that because like, we have the potential to create, to create like from scratch, but I want
Right.
to make sure I get it right.
Yeah, because also I know I think it was maybe you, Tom, I'm not sure, but like basically like revising and fixing irrigation systems, as many of you guys must know, is like such a painstaking and like frustrating process digging up someone else's work. So like you, Jade, being able to like do it as, as simply and as effective and efficiently as possible is really, not only is it really helpful for the plants, but it's helpful for maintenance in the future if there is any issues, right?
For sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Did anyone else want to kind of mention irrigation stuff or anything? Because like I said, I think it's really helpful for you guys to share amongst yourselves because you do work in similar fields. So whatever experience you're having, maybe it's an obvious solution to you, but it might not be to someone else or vice versa, Irrigation, wasteful overwatering was some issues. Please feel free to interrupt me. I'm just going to kind of fill the space with other things you guys mentioned. But underestimating, wait, what was that? Oh, somebody also was mentioning kind of billing for early maintenance. I believe it was Ruth. I think Ruth, you were saying like essentially like having some billing in your bid, your early proposal that includes like kind of some initial maintenance, like early maintenance, after 10 days or something like that, because if we just kind of set it and walk away, sometimes folks don't know how to take care of it. Did you want to mention anything about that?
Yeah, I just thought it was a better way to make sure that you get it in there and that they can see, or we can both see what is going on with the irrigation. So just to give it a check out within 10 days or at the 10-day period. And then that gives you also a chance to see how other things are growing, and then maybe just, mention further maintenance on pest control or weed maintenance that could come up, and just kind of have them see that it's better to have these things scheduled. So at least I think the first one could be built into the bid.
Did we lose Claire?
Did anybody hear what I said?
We heard what you said, and then I think we were all waiting for Claire to respond.
Oh, okay, yeah. 'Cause it
And I
looked
think
like
she
got booted
disappeared.
out. Oh.
So I'm just technical and emotional support over here. Although I do have the slides, and I can help out with content a little bit if needed. But we do kind of need Claire. Let's just give her a moment here. Of course, this had to happen in our last class because it had to happen once during this time. Does anybody have any? Well, no. I was gonna say if anybody has any good jokes, any good landscaping jokes. Only native landscaping jokes though are allowed. I don't, which is why I'm asking the question. But who's sharing their screen right now? Just so you're aware, someone's sharing their screen right now. We can see everything you're doing. I'm not sure who that is, but this is related to landscaping jokes. That may be okay. Is this Amy right now who's sharing her screen?
I
That's
think
not
it
me.
says Tom Kurthy.
Oh, I couldn't tell who that was. Okay. So we do have a good joke in the comments here. That's funny. It's nothing like a good turf grass joke for this crowd. Nothing like a good turf grass joke. Maybe I'll ask this question just because we're here together while we're waiting for Claire. My name is Ben Stapleton. For those of you, I think I said that at the beginning many weeks ago, but I'm the executive director here at USGBCLA, and I've been providing technical support on our end because I wanted to get certified as well through this program. Would love to get some of your thoughts if you have any you'd like to share on feedback for us. We're going to be going into our next phase of the program here soon and looking at, sort of round 2. This is the pilot, right? How can we improve? How can we broaden the outreach for this type of education? Make sure it gets to the right people. Any comments or feedback that anyone might want to share? And obviously, this was never intended to be a virtual only class. Maybe not, obviously, but it was never intended that way. We were just dealing with the circumstances that life presented us.
I'll share. I really enjoyed the class, Ben. I thought it would be kind of cool to include a section on plant communities in California to give kind of a broader understanding of how understanding the plant community can help you with design and maintenance. I think sometimes, like for me, I know going on hikes and going out into nature has kind of taught me different things. One example is having a woolly blue curls that was on drip irrigation and then seeing it on a south facing slope, in Southern California, in really rocky conditions. It kind of told me, oh, this is not wanting as much irrigation as I'm giving it, or, just things like that. I think it could help.
Thank you. That's really good feedback. And it's something I thought about too, just my own experience of this class, because I also do a lot of hiking and have been trying to identify plants when I go out. But to your point, there are different kinds of communities, right, of plants that sort of function together. And that's a really good point. Any other comments?
I might have an answer a helpful suggestion for Kara. This book, I don't know if you can read it backwards, but it's called Designing
California Native Gardens.
Yeah. And the subtitle is the plant community approach to artful ecological gardens. So it is focused. Are you familiar with this book? Kara, have you seen this? Oh,
Steve, can you put the title in the chat so people
yeah,
can see it?
Yeah, I'll put the title and the author.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other comments or feedback? This kind of stuff is really helpful for us. Also, some of these references are probably helpful for other students. One of the things I heard, we were also doing a Spanish language class that really was just 3 Saturdays, so it was a little bit more compacted. And I think that group was able to develop some good relationships. They're also doing it in person for part of the time. I think they had a different experience than maybe we had in this virtual session. Because ours was more spread out, right, and almost entirely virtual.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention also, I really enjoyed the part about finding plant replacements and how you gave us the quiz on what you could use instead of lavender or instead of rosemary, which natives can apply to that and if they can really substitute. I thought that was really interesting.
Okay, thank you. That's good feedback.
I'm back.
Hey, Claire. It's okay. We were having an impromptu feedback on the class session, so we could
Perfect.
I was letting them know this is a pilot, and we want to try to expand the content. So I was trying to get some feedback from the group here on what we could do in the future. So
Great. I'm gonna try to. I'm gonna reshare my screen.
are you okay, Claire? That's our first question.
I know
Are you
it must
safe?
have scared everyone. There was like a quick power outage. It went like on and off, but of course it resets
Yeah.
everything.
Okay.
So yeah, I wasn't like murdered. I guess that's too dark maybe for class, but
I don't know if that's where our minds instantly went. Just to be clear.
Right.
Yeah.
We're all different. All of our minds go different places. Well, hopefully it doesn't happen again, but anyway.
I have the slides if it does happen again.
Yeah, exactly. Get the slides, and Tim will be, I think, showing up shortly, so he could definitely give the rest of it if need be. But anyway, that being said, hopefully you guys continue to share homework stuff or any of the pilot stuff. Yeah, I think I'll just kind of wrap up homework review, I guess. But yeah, you guys had a lot of the same kind of issues, and hopefully we'll have more time maybe at the end to we can share some more if there's more extra time. I guess I'll just get into class since I killed some time there with the power outage thing. Yeah, so today is just should be quite a bit of review with a few extra tidbits, but essentially, yeah, putting it all together, we'll be kind of first talking about troubleshooting problems. We'll talk a little bit about like cost analysis for work plans, knowing what to charge, what to expect. A lot of it is similar things that we just talked about with the homework. And then how you can promote your certification and how do you talk to clients about it, and knowing how Theodore Payne and whatnot will promote you guys. So just getting into troubleshooting. So essentially with troubleshooting, it's like essentially before you run into any problems in your garden or in whatever gardens you're maintaining, you want to kind of have your established network of resources. And many of those can be the websites that we kind of talked about, like CalScape and California Native Plant Society websites, Theodore Payne, Las Pilitas, whatever websites. But it can also be, like a real live human being, if you have contact with some kind of horticultural expert, a native plant, someone that maybe just knows more than you do about native plants. And also just you guys together, you guys are all each other's resources too. But yeah, just make sure you have that in place or just know where to find it. And if you're like, you know what, I don't have any resources that I can touch base with, start making friends, start going to those CNPS meetings and just being enthusiastic gets you pretty far in the native plant community. I think, it's a little cohort of folks that are all excited about plants. So yeah, that's just kind of my little PSA about that. But basic troubleshooting steps, should be a review, but this kind of just goes for anything I think in life really, but understand the problem, make a plan, execute the plan, and then see if the problem got solved in whatever time frame you had planned for. And then if you don't solve the problem that you were trying to solve, just go back, repeat, right? So go back to understanding the problem, and now you will be able to understand it in more detail because it didn't respond to whatever plan you had created, right? So that's one more piece of information. So you can kind of just rinse, repeat over and over until it until you solve the problem, right? And yeah, and essentially just kind of, it's important to know that with any kind of new expertise or new area of work, there's going to be stuff that goes wrong, and you're just trying to enhance the skill set you already have. So expecting to be masters at this at the end of this class is, I think, unrealistic. Oh, I gotta move my, there we go. But yeah, just to go into each of those steps a little more detail. Understanding the problem. Essentially, if you're having some kind of issue in the garden that you don't know what to do about it. Now, obviously, if you're having issues in the garden and you know what to do, this is not the problem. But I think first step is kind of considering how the garden is different from other gardens that you work with, whether or not they're native or not. This is kind of, I think this is talking, the curriculum is very much for folks that are in maintenance already with maybe more conventional gardens. So a lot of the language is about kind of how to transition with natives. So kind of considering how is this different than the other gardens that I work with, whether they're native or not. And considering like all these questions are something that should go through your mind, like, is the issue I'm having unique to native plants? Or does it require some kind of different approach with native plants? So something like a summer deciduous plants, like we don't tend to have summer deciduous plants with those kind of conventional gardens. So this might be kind of a native plant, education thing, which is like, if this is a summer deciduous plant, it being dry and crispy in the summer is normal and part of its cycle and not something to worry about. Whereas maybe in a conventional garden setting, it would be something to worry about because it's you don't tend to see any kind of like deciduousness in summertime with like petunias or whatever. Well, that's not a good example anyway. But or it could be something like could be like the kind of approaches we have. So what I was saying is, does this require a different approach with native plants? So maybe somebody is like, hey, I'm getting like dieback on my manzanita and I regularly water it. What's going on? And that would be like, okay, it's that approach, which is regular watering isn't appropriate for Arctostaphylos, right? So just kind of like having those questions, like, is it unique to native plants, or is it, does it require a different approach? The next question is kind of, do you have a similar situation that's worked with other plants? So yeah, I mean, I think I think this is just kind of natural problem solving for folks in the field, which is just like, if you've tended any garden that's had this pest, what did you do then? Did it work? Do you think that could work in this situation? Is this plant, the next question is this plant unknown to you? And like, maybe you just don't know it very well and need to do more research. That's always a possibility with the natives, especially if, you only really know a few, maybe you only know about 10 of them, and there's, there's hundreds of different commonly used ones. And then lastly, yeah, do you need to ask someone? Do you need to ask someone for help with this issue? And again, that kind of goes back to having your resources all lined up. But essentially, you guys all know this, that all gardens have the potential for problems from a variety for a variety of reasons. Some of the kind of risks that are specific to natives, which we have discussed, but never hurts to repeat, which some of the specific risks in the garden are things related to water, which we went over at the homework, right? A lot of people talked about that. Water use, any kind of water use issues, water availability, irrigation, any of that kind of category is definitely something that's really important with natives because of the risk for overwatering, right? And because it's important. So anything with irrigation you want to pay attention to specifically with natives, because it's more of a problem. It can be more of a problem because it could be an example, like if you had a controller, like an irrigation controller, and it it failed or had a power outage like I just did. Sometimes they go back to a default mode, and that default mode might be like water 3 times a week. And if you're not paying attention to that, that would be so inappropriate and wrong for your native garden, right? So just anything water related can is kind of a risk for native plants. The next kind of issue I had in my notes was replanting as a specific kind of issue with natives, which replanting, this could be replanting replacement plants or relocating or anything like that. This is because of the thing we've talked about, which is like the first 3 years of establishing a plant are really important period. And the watering is maybe a little more frequent or a little more often than once they're established. So that's why it's important when you're replanting or adding, replacing a plant, because it's not like the kind of traditional style where you can just pop in a new one and leave it on the same irrigation as the other established plants and it's fine, in a conventional garden. With native plants, if you have a swath of ceanothus and one of them you're replacing or adding an extra one, you can't, that new one is going to be on a different watering schedule and most likely need to be hand watered. And it's really important that you're not just putting all of that established or the rest of that established swath on that kind of watering schedule, the same one as the newly planted one. So yeah, that's just kind of an issue with replanting. You want to be really cognizant of the fact that you are watering appropriately, I guess, for the age of the new replacement and not forcing the other established plants to kind of have that watering cycle. And that's just unique to natives, right? Because kind of a more conventional garden, you just pop in those little plugs from Home Depot and they can just be on the same watering schedule and it doesn't affect anyone to anything that's established, right? So that's an important difference and specific thing with natives. And then lastly, I just have kind of ant infestations. They can, we talked about this in the IPM class, but they can take over the root zones, especially with Ceanothus fragaria, the strawberries, and Heuchera and like salvias. Those particularly can have issues with ants. Anyway, so got on a tangent a bit, but understanding the problem, obviously. And second is making the plan. We talked about this in lesson 6, and this just going to review it sort of quickly. Again, this kind of looking at, specifically, this is kind of more pest issues, but it kind of works for anything, which is, describing the issue. When you're making your plan, you want to go through it pretty methodically and go through the whole plant. You want to describe the issue like the whole plant. So start with issues that affect the whole plant, right? So like, where is it in the life cycle? Is this plant new, established? What's the deal with it? If maybe it's, if you've pulled the plant out of the ground, like maybe it already died, investigating, is it just like a stem with, almost no roots attached? Or is it like you pulled it out and it still has that like pot matrix that it came in, it just has the same root ball, investigating that whole plant situation. Because, something like the little stem and no roots could indicate overwatering, whereas just like you pull it out and it's kind of just exactly how it was might indicate underwatering, maybe like neglect. So yeah, just look at the whole plant first. The next kind of priority, I guess, would be moving down to, the main stem or the branches. So if the problem's more localized, describing the section and what's happening. So is it a malformed new growth? Is it leaf drop? Is it the bark splitting, or is there like resin that's coming out? In this example, so this is a Arctostaphylos here. That's very common. They commonly have branch dieback problems. In fact, you can kind of see, I think you guys can see my cursor, but there's kind of this living red, and then over to the right here is like a branch that's died back. So that's very common with them. But yeah, just again, like what's working through the plant in terms of identifying and describing the problem so that you can make your plan accordingly. Next, the foliage, so leaves. Describe any deformation or discoloration or whatever oddities you might see in the leaves. I wish this was a picture of the leaves, but it's a flower. But something like this, like the mallows, they tend to get leaf miners quite frequently on their leaves. Or like something like galls that you would typically see on a manzanita or like a scrub oak or something. And this is kind of an important thing to remember. I mean, this is where you would remind or remember, I guess, yourself that there are those predatory prey relationships that can happen. And, you know, typically they kind of resolve themselves without any need to like do anything about it. But still, you want to note it, right? You know, if you're having leaf miners, like, is it something that maybe it's just going to resolve itself or not, right? Next, the flowers, again, this is just going through the IPM material, but whether the flowers are kind of just, are they regularly flowering in the same quantities and same time frame, and are they, you know, do they look normal essentially, or are they deformed? I've seen in mission manzanitas, sometimes it's like these misshapen flowers, or even the Arctostaphylos, the misshapen or deformed flowers when they're getting quite a bit of overhead irrigation or overcrowding, like too much humidity. I've seen that happen. But yeah, so.
I feel like also just hello everyone. Sorry I'm late. It's also been a while since I've seen people. It's been a crazy time. But also on the note of flowers, you know, your clients expect flowers. I think a lot of times people want plants because they're flowery. They see them out in nature, and also just not having abundance of flowers can also be a right plant, right place issue. You know, if something is a sun-loving perennial, and while it still may be growing vegetatively in a shadier area, you could be getting much less florals just due to the fact that there's less sun, you know, and so that might be something where you have to move the plant, transplant it, or swap something out if you want more flowers. So I would just, you know, that
Right.
as a note, you know, that can definitely be an issue in your analysis of a garden, is like, hey, you know, this Abutilon is surviving in the shadier zone, but I barely get flowers, and that's because that wants full sun, and you'll have a lot more flowers with that condition.
Good point. Yeah. Especially if it's something that is there for its flowers. I mean, I think most natives people love the flowering part, but yeah, that's a really good point. Lastly, the fruit. Again, most natives don't really have these kind of showy fruits, but something like this, like the Toyon, any kind of fruiting issues, again, misshapen or like, you know, unusual fruit drop, you know, maybe they all kind of self-abort for some reason, or just the production is different. That would be something to take note of. This Toyon here, actually, like right in the center, this leaf here, again, I can't really remember if you guys can see my cursor or not, but anyway, it's the front and center one. And that looks kind of like what leaf miner damage looks like, even though we talked about that in the foliage one, but just something to point out because we didn't have an image of it. But yeah, in terms of fruit, yeah, I think that might just be, again, you know, this would be something you take note of and would make a plan around.
And I would also bring this back to watering as well. You know, a lot of plants will abort both fruit and flowers if there's not enough moisture. And aborting fruit typically signifies a lack of pollination or a lack of fertility that's happened in the process of pollination. And so it'll just drop fruit because for the plant, there's no point in expending more resources if there's not actually a seed encapsulated in that fruit. So a lot of fruit drop. And also it can also happen because of really severe heat waves. I mean, this is a great year to be thinking about all of these topics because of the irregular nature of the weather, which is probably not going to be irregular. It's just erratic is regular now. So yeah, like a lack of moisture in the soil during times when there should be, or super strong heat waves or like winds can definitely cause those issues. And sometimes that's just like you're explaining that to your clients, like, hey, this happened because we've had these desiccating winds, knocked off fruit, or, you know, we didn't get good fruit set because of the lack of precipitation, which is another reason to irrigate in dry winters like we're having now. Hopefully everyone's been doing that.
Right. Right. Also, sometimes if you shouldn't be needing to fertilize, but if you're putting a high nitrogen fertilizer on your plant, you're encouraging it to do vegetative growth as opposed to flowering and fruiting. So, I mean, like I said, you don't want to be doing fertilizing, but if that is something that's happening, that can also be a reason that something's just not fruiting. It's just not, it has more energy and resources for vegetative growth. So it doesn't necessarily set the fruit. And then, okay, so I'm talking about making a plan, right? So then you just kind of list and look for patterns, right? So this would just be like making your list of the issues that you've seen and where on the plant they are, but then also you want to, like, you know, kind of what are the solutions with those? So again, you're touching base with whatever resources you have to figure that out, or your own experience, and being like, okay, what are the solutions I have in mind for this? And eliminating any solutions that you're like, you've already tried or you know about, or that kind of don't apply to your situation. And yeah, just looking for some kind of pattern when trying to find either like identify the issue or the solution, right? And definitely documenting this. I think it's really helpful to have pictures of, you know, whatever thing that's happening and of it as it changes. You know, maybe, you know, the one visit you see it's very light infestation, and the next one it's out of control, or even just the process in general, you know, like noting what did this look like when I first noticed it, and is it changing, is it improving, is it getting worse? But documenting these kind of issues is really helpful. You always think you're going to remember, but you never do. So yeah, looking for the pattern. Yeah, that can be temporal, like temporally, like, is there a pattern I'm seeing every season? Is it spatially, like I'm always seeing it in this corner of the yard where there's not a lot of airflow, you know, just kind of looking for patterns in that, in any way you can really think of, I suppose. Yeah, and then, you know, you're devising a plan, and that plan is gonna be different, you know, for every case. There's not really like a set way to devise a plan, but, you know, essentially you're just using your own judgment and your skills based off of all of the things that you've just kind of gone, all the listing that you go through, checking your resources and, you know, your knowledge of that site, and just making a plan and then executing that plan, right? So the executing it is actually means a visit to the site, right? So you're implementing it, doing it, and make sure you actually work your plan. Don't like second guess yourself and be like, well, I don't know, and just like do the actual plan. And if it's not, you know, working, that's when you would change and do something else, right? But you want to make sure that you try to genuinely execute this plan that you've come up with, right? So that you can eliminate it if it doesn't work. And then when you are working your plan, you always want to make sure you're kind of addressing any irrigation issues first. Again, like if you're having issues with, like, you know, maybe a lot of crown rot, and you don't deal with the irrigation first, and you're just having a bunch of plants that are dying, and you're just replacing plants after plants, you're not addressing the real issue. So address any irrigation issue first, because it's kind of like the crux of most problems. So make sure to address that first, and then deal with, you know, whatever pest issue or infestation or anything like that, and then replace plants. So make sure, kind of go in that order if you have all three, kind of essentially. Yeah, so yeah, addressing, okay, yeah, I think that's pretty much it. Next is, yeah, so seeing if the problem was solved. And seeing if it was solved within the time frame that you intended, not like 10 years from now, but like, did you solve it within the time frame that you had planned for within the plan you came up with? Because obviously these things don't resolve overnight. You know, sometimes an infestation might take 2 weeks to actually dissipate, you know, to actually go down. So making sure that you're noting if it's changing at all. Yeah, I think the main takeaway is just, you really do have to have some patience here with your plan, or with your when you're executing different plans. And just the patience is important, because if it doesn't work, like I was saying, you can discard your plan and choose another one. But it's kind of important to have that process of elimination, right? Because if you actually genuinely execute it and it doesn't work, then you're like, great, that's a piece of information you can use to solve the problem as you go forward, right? So just making sure that you don't just like kind of willy-nilly try to do everything like all over the place, because it seems like maybe you're doing everything at once, but it really isn't helpful. You really want to make sure that you're kind of doing it pretty methodically. Okay, actually I'm gonna stop my share. I'm gonna share a different document. So yeah, talking about like a cost analysis for a work plan. Is this the document? Yes. Okay, so yeah, kind of some of the financial aspects for native plant landscaping. There's this, I kind of have two sheets here kind of so we can kind of side by side compare more like a conventional maintenance situation versus a native plant maintenance situation. And your garden assessment is really going to help you with determining like the estimated hours. That's that garden assessment that we talked about last week is really going to help kind of like form your plan for maintenance on a site. So I wouldn't get too stuck here with like the numbers specifically or like the different activities that are listed, just more about how you think about the two different approaches, right? So here I have, just so you guys know, there's this tab here below that says turf garden and the native garden, just in case, because they look really similar. Just make sure you pay attention to which one I'm on. If you're confused, just check here. But essentially, so this is kind of like a, I'll be toggling between the two, so that's why I'm making it clear. But essentially here, so just to kind of orient, this is a project, and estimating the kind of hours and cost for maintaining a site. This is a really simple example. And here it's got front and side gardens, and this again is a turf kind of conventional garden. And under the front and side gardens, there's turf, which is 1,000 square feet, and the bedding area, which is 200. So you have 1,200 square feet for the front and side, and then the backyard also turf with some bedding and a slope, and it has a total of 1,300 square feet. So a total of 2,500 square feet. And hold on a second, I gotta move some things over so I can see. And then you have these kind of hours, this column of hours per month. So again, this is a turf landscape. So here I have a little note. So this is like this client, because it's turf, you're visiting every week, right? You have to mow every week and do all the maintenance for, hedging or whatever it is for this site. So this is a 4 times a month kind of operation. So the turf requires an hour per visit. So for the month, it would be 4, right? And you just divvy up each section into how long does it take me to maintain this site, right? And this is something that you will determine. I have another tab for this that I will get into a second. But so yeah, anyway, so you have your hours, divvy up each section. You've got a total of 16 hours per month for this site, which is technically like about 4 hours per visit, right? Because we're saying this person does weekly visits, or this maintenance schedule is weekly. So 16 hours means 4 hours per visit, right? And then down below, we have labor costs. So this maintenance worker is $40 an hour, let's just say. And you just, obviously you do your costs per month and you do these hours. So this one, let's just say $40 an hour for this guy, 16, or for this woman, whoever, 16 hours, it's 640 per month, right? And per visit, that's this divided by 4, because there's 4 weeks in a month. There's technically like 4 point whatever, but here, so it's 160 per visit, right? And then you can even have your annual costs, which is some 7 something. And then you can even figure out your annual cost per square foot, which is helpful to have, especially if you're kind of doing like estimates on the fly. Like somebody's like, well, how much would this cost for me to do? And if you know that most of your jobs are about in the $3 per square foot annually, you can be like, oh, this 1,000 square foot yard, this is probably running you like $3,000 a year to like maintain, that sort of thing. And you can do the same with your natives. So we're gonna toggle over to, I have this, the native plant kind of versions. So say we took that same yard essentially and converted it to native plants. Again, here we have the front and side yards. In the back garden, you have your 1,200. The total square footage is 2,300. It went down a bit. Maybe, I don't know, you have some hardscaping or something like that you included. But roughly it's about the same square footage. It's gone down only 200 square feet. And this site, it says twice a month. Though we talked last week about bi-monthly being every other month, it really is just depends on what situation, maintenance schedule you have come up with whatever client. But in this example, we're just going to say twice a month, right? Which is probably the most frequent situation for like an established garden. So hours per month is 8. And again, this is only twice a month. So that would mean 4 hours per visit, right? So it comes out to the same hours per month as the last one, still 16, but you're doing a longer day of work per visit, right? So if this is 16 hours and it's only 2 visits, obviously a full 8-hour day per visit is what we're kind of the example is here. We're using the same $40 an hour maintenance worker, and it comes out to the same cost per month and the same annual cost, but obviously the cost per visit goes up. So you're making more per visit because it's more hours spent in the garden, right? And then again, the annual cost per square foot is about the same. It's a little bit higher because, like I said, the square footage went down. But the important part is kind of determining the hours to do each of these maintenance tasks. Sorry. So hours per month, you want to have a pretty accurate number of hours for whatever tasks you need to do in that garden. Not all gardens are the same. Maybe your tasks are different. Maybe someone just wants pruning. Maybe they want irrigation, revising and fixing and pruning, or weeding. Who knows? Again, it depends on your client. But here's a little table that you can kind of use to estimate, kind of to get those values for the hours per month, or to get a proper estimate, right? And it's really not about this is, I think, where this is all going to be dependent on your worker, your work crew. You have to kind of come up with these numbers maybe for yourself based off of how quickly you or your workers work. But it's helpful to have each of these little kind of categories or tasks and have a time frame for them. And you can create one of these tables yourself, or just customize this for a site. And again, like here we have, oh, that's right, I didn't mention this, but you remember that we've talked about the different years. The first lecture, we talked about each year, kind of the different tasks that you can expect, and how the first year you'll probably be doing more frequent visits versus as it gets older, you can do fewer visits. And these here below has those tasks listed. Those are also in your workbook, and we've gone over them, and I think it was in the first lecture actually, and maybe it's repeated again in another. But anyway, you can kind of use that to customize this table. And here it has weeding per 100 square foot. It's 0.25 hour, a quarter of an hour to do, so 15 minutes. And you just assign times for this. So this one also always want to have sweep and cleaning up time, which takes about a half hour. Scheduling and irrigation checkup, even watering before you leave, 30 minutes for that. Tip pinch new plants per 100 square foot. Again, it's a new garden, so you really do want to be pinching any of your new plants to have that dense growth. And here it has per 100 square feet, and it takes 0.1 hours, which is 6 minutes. So again, this is something that you guys determine. You can also customize it to be like, per plant. It totally depends. But I think it's helpful to have each of these tasks like we do below, kind of given an hour or amount of time, so that you can have a really accurate estimate.
One thing also that's not on here, which, if you garden on the edge, meaning like near wildlife, like how many hours you spend, especially if your client is wanting organic control of vertebrate pests, gophers, ground squirrels,
Right.
that can be every day for 2 weeks, which is something that if they're gonna, you could suggest outsourcing that to another company, but they're gonna pay way more than if they just pay a landscape contractor to do the trapping and extermination of vertebrate pests, which can wipe out, you frame it that way, if you don't deal with these pests, they'll wipe out thousands of dollars worth of plants in the matter of days, weeks. So some of these things also aren't accounted for, right? There's a lot of activities,
Right.
every garden's nuanced, but just something like that, be like, we offer a pest control program that's like for 2 weeks. We come every day in the spring and in the fall to do ground squirrel and rabbit and gopher control organically, and that is something that is worth a lot of money to clients, because that's going to save their plants and also protect the landscape from physical damage that all of those rodents cause.
Right. Yeah. I think, I think not only is this table helpful for like making an accurate estimate, but listing each activity is a way to also then kind of put on your bid or your proposal to them to show them what maintenance actually is. Because a lot of folks kind of forget that native plants need maintenance. So, specifying each of these activities, and not just by hours for your estimate, like I said, but having them specified for yourself so that when you write up your bid, you have that kind of included. You can say what's all included in your services, like, vertebrate pest control, or any of these things, pruning, irrigation. But yeah, I think assigning a time for each of these things is really, really helpful for when you make those estimates or you make those proposals. Over here on occasional, I think you would just kind of sub these into whatever is necessary. But this is a really helpful one, I think, like know how long it takes to prune a large, like Salvia clevelandii or something, so that you're like, okay, it takes a half hour to do that by hand. So if you have like 6 of those in the landscape, that's going to be a lot, that's several hours of work. So just making sure you're appropriately putting enough time or allowing enough time for the work that's included in your proposal. Let's see if there's anything else. Yeah, I think this is pretty self-explanatory, but yeah, it's helpful to have, line trim bunch grasses per plant. I mean, I just like how this is broken up. I think if you just kind of use any of these in the time frames, it's really helpful. Here it says prune by hand a medium-sized shrub per 10 plants, and that's 1.5 hours. So that means it's about 9 minutes. We're estimating 9 minutes per plant. So coming up with these numbers for yourself, I think, can be really helpful. I mean, you could just time yourself, I suppose, if you wanted to get that. But generally, you'll know how long it takes to do each of these activities and just kind of customize it to each garden site. Okay, I think this last tab, this last tab is like a turf kind of proposal. But again, like I said, I think it's helpful to see this in terms of kind of this, like, for example, here it has all the different activities that would be included for turf. And there's lots of fertilization 6 times a year. The shrubs are 4 times. You got your weed control, dump fees. This is included. They're on site, all the kind of different activities. I think this is key to kind of mimic this format, say, for native plants, so that again, people have your clients have a good idea of like what exactly is maintenance of native plants, because it might not be obvious to them. And it's an opportunity to educate, as we were talking in the homework review. Always having a moment, or any place you can educate your clients about like the work that needs to be done in the garden is really helpful. And like we were talking in the homework review, this might be where you include like, hey, in the cost of this is the, first 2 weeks, we check the irrigation system or blah, 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 or whatever we were kind of mentioning, like include that into this bid for a maintenance kind of contract. Let's see.
I also just want to put the caveat on this pricing worksheet. The horticulturist who helped us develop this works for HOAs, so you can kind of see that in some of the numbers, because I think it in general is probably a little pricier than what the average person is gonna want to pay, right? Like $1,600 a month is it's a lot of bread. You know, that's how much it costs to send my kid to preschool. But you know, just taking that with a grain of salt, right? An HOA is going to be very different, a little bit, you know, probably going to pay more for regular maintenance. They're probably usually going to be hiring a larger landscape firm, but there is that kind of significant difference between how you're going to be approaching commercial clients versus residential. And I know probably a lot of you are more on the residential side, but there's a lot of money to be made off of the commercial landscapes. You know, and so yeah, that's just kind of wanted to throw that in there because I see a lot of more like commercial application in these numbers than maybe a smaller residential kind of pricing worksheet, but they're still applicable, right? You know, and commercial is typically larger, so they're probably like, wait, what? You're going to prune those by hand? And we have 1,000 salvia clevelandii. I don't think that makes sense, but you know, so I think you have to balance it, right? And the scale often determines how you might be approaching the pricing to a certain extent.
Right. Good point. Yeah, exactly. I think, yeah, maybe not trying not to get stuck on the specific numbers here, because you're going to know your client and you're probably familiar with, you know, how much they're willing to pay, and you can charge accordingly. But this is just, yeah, helpful for kind of just thinking about how to like make a work plan and also what to include in it. And I think, I'm not sure if I have any other comments on this. I think, yeah, I think what's nice too, I mean, I'm sure many of you guys kind of have this on your type of proposals, but you know, this section here was just extra plant material or irrigation materials, and you have the costs kind of on there, and you know, irrigation is cost plus 15%, and you have any labor costs for specialty stuff, like an irrigation specialist comes out, they have a different rate. So in this case, it's 26 per hour for the maintenance worker. So again, it can change whatever, you know, based off of your situation, but having all these kind of fees, not fees, sorry, like this kind of all depicted here on a form for someone to look at, I think is really helpful. So they kind of just know upfront. They know what to expect up front, because this is part of managing a client's expectations, right? So anytime you can give them more information, I think the better. If there's no other comments, I'm going to go back to, actually, we can do a break, I believe. Let's come back at 6:10. Yeah, let's do 6:10. And I'll bring back the PowerPoint in the meantime. We'll just take a break.
It's the last class. Can't believe it.
I know, right?
I'm definitely going to want to save 5 minutes at the end just to talk some logistics and stuff.
Nice. Yeah, I think I mean,
I don't know if I came so late. I'm sorry.
No, did you know? I texted you, but there was a power outage at my house, like in the middle of homework review.
Oh no.
And I was like, no, and it just like went all black, and I was like, damn it. And anyway, I mean, it was just quick, but of course it turns off the internet and everything, so it has to like all reload again. And I was like, I don't know. And then I came back, and of course Ben was taking care of everything, but I was like, what's going on?
I feel like we covered it gracefully. We almost made it seem like it was planned, Claire.
Holding it down.
Yeah,
perfect.
You'd be back in just a moment. And
I was kind of hoping, I was like, maybe they're just like talking about the homework review still without me even having to be there. That'd be perfect.
I was even thinking, I was like, you know, I'll pull up the slides. I'm game. Like, there's speaker notes. I'll just dive in. You know,
right?
It'll be okay. And
right.
I just asked for some feedback in the interim, and I asked if anyone had any good landscaping jokes. And
I'm sure, I was convinced, I'm sure like the vain person in me was like, I bet I got froze on like a crazy face or something, you know?
It was terrible. Yeah, it was terrible. Really bad. Just so
I knew it.
Yeah.
Full nostrils.
Full nostrils, yeah. Cross-eyed and everything, like.
Blackouts, dang. What?
Yeah. Then we had hail today and like crazy wind.
Yeah.
So I was a little scared about, like, I was like, is this going to, But yeah, we've had really crazy wind all day, so I'm not surprised. But
Yeah, I was screaming into the wind like I was on a boat today at work.
nice.
Like it felt like I was on a. It was so windy. It did feel like I was out in the open water.
Right.
It was, yeah, sea shanty time.
Sea shanty. Yeah, definitely was kind of like a blustery, stormy day.
I feel like the wind just neutralized whatever rain we got. Like
Right.
it was so little amount of rain. It was so windy. It was like the
Right.
rain was coming sideways.
Yeah, exactly. It was
Like-
coming like full sideways, and I was like, well, that was fun.
And then I hit over my gopher mounds and there was no infiltration. It was
Right,
just-
yeah.
It turned my windshield just kind of like more gray.
Right. It's like
And
gets it
then-
like all like muggy and yeah.
Yeah, it was. It's like LA is so funny. Everyone's like, "Oh my god, it's gonna rain! Yuck!" I'm like, really?
I'm
Really
native.
bummed about the
I'm just like, it's
rain?
good luck when it rains here. When it rains, I'm like, yes.
No,
yes,
I know. I'm like, we
right,
should be
yeah.
excited. Like, you're
Yeah.
bummed. Like, come on. That's
Plus, my garden needed it. We've had a really down water year so far.
Ugh.
Like, we need a month of rain.
oh, it's
badly.
been horrible. Yeah.
Yeah.
February is traditionally the rainiest month,
Yeah.
so to have a zero measurable precipitation is sad.
Well, and having lived here my whole life, like I always kind of, we come out of this period. It's like, when you hit April and you haven't had rain, it's kind of like, that was it. Like, like last year it was weird. We had maybe one storm in May, I think, and another one, but that's rare, right?
Mhm.
Yeah, we got late rain, and
Yeah.
hopefully people learn their lesson and aren't going to do any gender reveal parties in the dry brush this year. And
God.
yeah, the fire year, one after the other.
Yeah,
But
I
we
don't know if I
just-
would count on people to change their behaviors. That doesn't ever seem to work too well
Yeah.
for us, unfortunately. Right. I just presented actually today to the California Forestry and Fire Prevention Board on why they should be leveraging sort of our green building community to help roll out more best practices around fire safe, fire wise design and maintenance for both, buildings and landscapes. So we're trying to make a big push here to kind of create a little bit of cultural change within the design build community.
Yeah,
Nice.
it's got to happen. Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't mean to get so serious there for a moment.
No, it's good to get serious. It's something to take seriously. I don't, people don't take it seriously enough. And I like this new idea of microgridding too. I think that is a really cool concept. I know that's more on the side of like keeping sustainable power going, not relying on such large grids.
Yeah.
I heard some piece like some town in like Salinas or like up in San Luis Obispo, they're going to build their entire own power grid because they were cut off so many times last year. And it's a
Oh, wow.
huge like produce processing community. Like everyone's job is in agriculture or food processing and refrigerating of like all these perishable goods. So it really threw a wrench in their economy to have, because they shut the power down to prevent fires, I guess, which is this like balance of like, yeah, but people still need power. People in nursing homes still need air conditioning when it's like 110 degrees outside. Like we gotta find a way forward.
Yeah.
Are we at 6:10? Almost. I'll wait a little bit more. Okay. 6:10. Okay. So back to the PowerPoint. So just some kind of best practices for record keeping and metrics, I guess, which is inventory of your plants and your plant collection. Plant inventory is super helpful, especially if you're like applying for the garden tour, which I know isn't happening. Well, the garden tour is happening, but the application isn't happening right now. But it's helpful to have all of that sorted out. And that isn't just, I mean, that's for the client's sake, obviously, right? You know, so they know what they have. And that could be, they could have a million reasons for that. That could be like, they want to learn, they want to have an educational kind of garden, or they have their own kind of like conservation goals. But it's also really helpful for you as the, you know, garden landscaping or the garden person for their, you know, whatever role you have in terms of their garden, because, you know, if you have to replace anything in the future, or even just kind of knowing what works and doesn't in someone's garden. So having like a up-to-date inventory, and a nice specific one too, right? So that you're making sure that you have, like, if you have Eriogonum, you know that you have Eriogonum fasciculatum and not you know, Eriogonum grande rubescens or something. So just making sure you have a really like accurate and up-to-date inventory of someone's collection. And usually, you know, their collection is, you know, made up of like a core collection, like any annual or seasonal kind of color, like wildflowers or something. And then, you know, some kind of like historic or sentimental collection, which might include plants that were there before they transitioned to native plants, or kept for, you know, whatever reason, like they like the shade, or some emotional reason, whatnot. But having, like, considering a database of some sort, and, you know, this could look like a bunch of different things. I'm sure you guys have recommendations too, but it could just be like something on your phone with a picture of the plant, or it could be like an Excel spreadsheet or something like that. But this might be something, a lot of you guys are in design, so you might have the design on hand, and, you know, or this could be combined with your garden assessment. So the map that you created for your garden or site assessment, you know, maybe that will just have an inclusion of the inventory, and just having all those documents together, or asking the homeowner, right? They might have the design layout. It just totally depends. But having some place where you have an inventory and potentially a map with that inventory of all the plants in the garden. You can include also like any hardscaping stuff, like, or even the mulch, like maybe you bought it and you really like that type of mulch, making sure that's indicated on this kind of inventory or kind of site assessment map, however you want to create it. But again, having the plant, you know, the botanical name and the variety is super helpful, because, you know, somebody that might want like a yarrow, like, you know, the yarrows have all the like rainbow of colors, and maybe they're like, I have paprika, I don't want island pink or something like that. So making sure that you have, you know, just have everything written down and in some place that the client has access to. I think it's just also kind of offers just like a little more professional of a presentation to have that also. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of little notes about little things here, but I think it's just kind of comes down to whatever map you have. This is just a kind of sample little chart I just threw up for, you know, that you could do in Excel. And again, like, this would maybe correspond with a map, but you want to have, you know, you could have however much information or however little, I think, but important is just to have where, when, and what is it that was planted there. So here we have like a location, like the front yard, backyard, the zoning, super helpful to zone. This could relate to like the hydro zone, or like whatever your irrigation system and however it's divided by hydro zones, or even just if you just zone it out anyway, because, you know, in terms of like north, south, east, west, or this corner, however you want to zone your garden. I think it's always helpful, especially if you're communicating with crew or other people about the garden. It's super helpful to have some kind of zoning. That way you can, if there's something specifically like, hey, I irrigated zones A, B, and C, but I didn't irrigate zone D because it looked kind of wet, or, you know what I mean? It's just a way to communicate about an area. So I really am a big fan of naming zones. But yeah, so moving forward, common name, scientific name. Obviously you want to have the date planted. Here I just kind of made up something here, and you can have the source, like here's Theodore Payne. This one was from Las Pilidas. You can put the cost if that is important to you, and knowing how much you spent on it. And then the quantity. And then you can also kind of create these kind of like alphanumeric codes that could potentially like correspond to a map. So that can include whatever information that is important to you. So I just kind of made one up that was like HA1, which is just Heteromeles arbudifolia, planted in 2021. So I just put 1. And then this one is in 2019, it's planted, so I put a 9. And then I just added a D here because it's Davis Gold and it's not the kind of traditional red one. So this is just kind of an example, but again, you can put the notes, do whatever you want in the notes, like put things when it died. Here I just put like a pest when it happened. It's totally up to you guys about what you want to include in your kind of inventory or your Excel spreadsheet. I think there's another one. Oh, this is another kind of like sample inventory record. I don't know what program this belongs to, but it's helpful in that it has a photo of the plant in the garden, and then it has kind of a stock photo of it. So, and even in the note here, it says like, it's pretty scraggly looking. It sends up shoots, but it's messy and grim looking, and it's never flowered. And that was in 2018. And you go down to the date, and it was planted in 2013. So, this really helps you have the long perspective of like, oh, something's up with this plant. It's not flowering. It doesn't look very good, and here's the photo that's provided. This would really help you make a plan about dealing with this. Potentially it's in the wrong spot.
I would also say that, there's a lot of reasons to have your own database or, your own record keeping, and documenting the gardens that you care for is a critical part of selling your business to other future clients. They're going to want to see, okay, you say you have all this experience, but your business probably has an Instagram, it probably has a website, and you have to drive traffic with content, and content is really going to come from you, unless you're paying a photographer. And so having your kind of database or your record keeping system as a store for all the amazing photos and all the beautiful plants is a great place to have. And then you can use that as source material for pitching planting schemes to clients, instead of having to, look through the internet for photos or having to redo all of that work to create documents to pitch your clients. You can just click on whatever species that you intend to plant, export them to whatever kind of format document you're using to do presentations, and bam, you have your presentation ready, as opposed to having to resource documents all the time. And that's something that I did when I was doing landscaping. I would take pictures of even the day they went in and throughout time, and then I just have my own stock photos, which it's really hard to find some stock photos with good, like, do people actually follow the copyright rules on the internet? Probably not, because who's like checking to see if you stole that Heteromeles photo. But actually getting good quality photos that you can say, this is my plant that I take care of, I planted, that's really valuable in my mind. And so just kind of having that right at your fingertips is really, really useful. And this database, this looks like maybe it was created on Access or something, which is like a Microsoft product, which it's not in the typical suite, you'd have to buy it. But having a database it's full nerd level stuff, but it's very useful.
Yeah, that's a good point. I was gonna add something to what you were just saying. Also the stock photos, like, not only is it just convenient and sometimes hard to find exactly what you're looking for, but I think also I've used several of my own photos kind of as like educational pieces for clients. You know, again, it's another way to show the expectations. So a lot of times I try to like share with them like, hey, this is what your garden looks like right after planting out. It's kind of a mulch garden. It looks pretty brown, so that they can really understand and they're not like disappointed when they're just like, oh, it's just mulch right now and it doesn't have that kind of immediacy. So again, I think the photos can provide like a source for your own kind of education to your clients. That could be whatever services like you provide, like, hey, these are the plants, but also, you know, helping to manage expectations for them too, you know, like this, or even if you're like, this is what an overcrowded garden looks like, it gets like this, you know, just even the shitty photos, or excuse me, like the not so great photos, I think are helpful to have. So people, because they're just going to be like, no, I really want it to be full, you know, and just giving them the kind of both sides of the story so they can make a better decision and, you know, have an educated decision when they choose what they want for their garden. Let's see. This is just, this is pretty self-explanatory, but yeah, you can also have labels. Obviously, this is kind of like a kind of botanical garden style label, but there's also the kind of metal tags. And this is super, I think it just kind of gives a more professional look. It helps, it totally depends on your client, obviously, but this is great for the owners and any visitors that want to learn more about native plants. And so I like using these, and you can use the metal tags if maybe they don't want it to be so conspicuous or something. And I like to put also on the tag like when it was planted, like what year, so that you kind of have an easy, quick reference, so you don't have to look at your database if you're on site maintaining the garden. Next is like metrics. So this is mostly referring to an install, not necessarily, I mean, yeah, I guess this works for maintenance too, but specifically when you're talking about like, how do you determine if this install is successful? This is kind of, you know, depends on the client, right? You know, they determine like, okay, this works, but it's important for you to give them a really accurate expectation of what to expect. You know, what is considered a successful kind of install? When is it theirs? You know, when can you kind of help them recognize it, like, oh, it's done, it's like, it's successful, it's working, it's alive, this is the garden it's mine now to take care of. Even if you might hire some maintenance, it's important for the kind of pass that baton, right? And some of those metrics can be anything from biodiversity to you know, full year blossoming or seasonal color, or a good one is the plant growth in the first 6 months. So it's just having different metrics for determining what is considered successful. A good one to start with is plant establishment. So giving the clients some kind of idea about the survival rate, you know, so letting them know like maybe 100% aren't going to make it, but in the first, you know, usually in the first 2 weeks, like whoever wasn't going to make it for whatever random reason doesn't make it in that first chunk of time. So giving them that kind of expectation that like, you know, you might have just like 95% success rate or something like that, or whatever your rate is, depending on your own experience. But yeah, kind of that can be something like within the, you know, plant establishment, so that they actually, not just establishment into the 3 years, but I mean like sticking, and they survive that initial kind of initial couple weeks in the ground. Another one can be them, like this says here, doubling in size in the first 6 months. In the first year. And not all of them will, but that can be kind of a key, that can be something you kind of explain. So it's like some, you know, many of the plants will double in size. So that can be kind of some metric you can use, or you can share with them, so that they look for that, you know, so your client is looking for that, because you really want to have the engagement from them too. So giving them little clues onto like, what should they be looking for? Like blooming, and you know, also all just like diversity, animals, bugs, everything, you know, like encouraging them to see their garden in that way, as opposed to maybe the conventional, like it just has a you know, full of plants or something, you know, like starting to get them to measure the success of their garden in kind of a more holistic way, and more maybe long-term, you know. Also birds, you know, the presence of birds in the garden is a great metric, you know, right? It's like, now it's a habitat with this level of biology in it, right? You know, this level of animal activity. Let's see, I think lastly is managing expectations, which we've touched on quite a bit. But yeah, kind of what they expect and what's realistic. And everyone's going to have their own way of communicating with a client. And you just want to have some way that you're guiding them day to day on how they can be successful and have a successful garden, especially if they're not paying for maintenance and they want to do it. You know, it really depends. You know, not everyone can afford to have maintenance, but they just want it installed, or they want less frequent maintenance. It totally depends on the client, though, obviously, and whatever arrangement you have with them. So you might, I think, having, you know, if you have someone who's very, maybe they are a native plant aficionado already, you know, you probably won't be doing that much, you know, maintenance or even need to do much with them. But maybe somebody who's like a novice, but they're really enthusiastic, kind of new native plant lover, and they don't really know where to, like how to maintain the garden, and maybe don't know what to expect or how to maintain it at the level that they're used to with a kind of conventional, traditional kind of turf lawn situation. So those type of folks, you really want to make sure that you're educating them. I mean, you want to educate all your clients, but especially those like novice ones, because they're new converts, right? They're like they're newly new adopters to this kind of modality, right? So making sure that they, excuse me, that you're educating them, and so they understand what maintenance is. That's what I was talking about with the pricing worksheet, is like what's included in maintenance, because lots of folks really have this idea that native plants are, well, they're native, so I just put them in and I don't have to do anything. So making sure that you're taking every opportunity, every touch to explain to them what maintenance is included or what's important with maintaining their gardens, so that they are familiar with it, and it's not like a shock to them when you're like,